The chamber gleamed with artificial gravity lighting and the expensive arrogance of the galactic elite. Hollow banners shimmered above the vast domed amphitheater in orbit over Tridaxa Prime, announcing yet another emergency session of the United Galactic Concord. It was pageantry, spectacle, diplomacy wrapped in sequins and self-importance. 1,000 delegates hummed in their translation headsets, their various biologies twitching and glimmering in idle pretense of attention. The real reason they were here sat at the heart of the marble platform, coiled on a throne carved from the bones of extinct titans. General Khazur of the Zarkith Dominion, the warlord of bladed peace, stretched his clawed hands and narrowed his glowing, slit-pupiled eyes. Let it be known, Khazur growled into the atmosphere mic, that the humans have once again declined to participate in the defense of peace. He spoke with the deliberate rhythm of someone rehearsed, recorded, and addicted to the drama of his own voice. They hide behind couriers, letters, treaties, silence. You would think a species born of violence would understand the necessity of open strength. The murmur of delegates rose, some nodding, others hesitating. The Nave T ambassador rubbed his antennae nervously. The Sat Hall delegation, ever emotionless, simply blinked in synchronized pattern. Only the Harkonites chortled through their scent glands, relishing Khazur's showmanship. Khazur leaned forward, predatory. Let me speak to them directly. Patch the Terrans in. A soft ping. Somewhere in the depths of Earth's quiet defensive bureaucracy, a diplomat's feed lit up. Connected came the disembodied voice of the Concord AI. The screen on the chamber floor flickered. At first, there was just static. Then, slowly, a cozy room emerged, simple furniture, a bookshelf filled with Earth classics, and a man sitting on a small couch. The man wore a crisp dark blue uniform with silver piping and a calm, almost sleepy expression. His skin was fair, his hair close-cropped and graying at the temples. He looked like a teacher, or maybe a retired gardener. He was stirring cream into coffee. "Good morning," the man said with a warm, practiced smile. "My name is Ambassador Loreen. I represent Earth's outer territories and their stance on all this." He waved gently toward the projection. Admittedly impressive bluster. The chamber fell into a moment of stunned silence. Khazur stood. "Is this a joke?" No, Loreen replied, sipping. "Though if it were, I'd say the punchline is you, General." The Nvethi ambassador gasped in 3 languages simultaneously. Khazur snarled. "You mock me, human?" "Oh no," Loreen replied. "I assure you, that was me being perfectly diplomatic. Would you prefer sincerity?" He glanced to someone off-screen and whispered, "Is he always this grumpy?" Khazur slammed a clawed fist into his throne, cracking the ancient fossilized material beneath it. "You fear us. Your people refuse to take sides. You stand apart, silent, distant. You send only words. Because you know what open war would bring." Loreen blinked mildly. "Oh, General, I fear we've misunderstood each other. Earth isn't avoiding war out of fear. We're avoiding it out of kindness." Another beat of silence. Even the Council AI had no preset protocol for that kind of reply. Khazur hissed, "You dare to lecture me on kindness?" "No, I wouldn't lecture a being with that many blades," Loreen said kindly. "But I will tell you this. We have no interest in galactic war. We don't need it. It's a waste. Inefficient. Expensive. Noisy." Khazur's jaw flexed. "And yet, when pushed, what will you do?" Loreen smiled again. This time, something flickered behind it. Not malice, not bravado, but a suggestion of something far more dangerous. Certainty. "Well, we talked about it," Loreen said. "Earth's Council, I mean. We watched your broadcasts. Read your threats. Impressive speechcraft, by the way. But we figured perhaps we'd respond." Khazur narrowed his eyes. "So we sent someone." A silence swept the chamber. "You sent someone?" Khazur echoed slowly. Loreen nodded and set his mug aside with precision. "Yes. We thought sending a full fleet would be, well, excessive. So we sent one. Just one." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Hisses. Growls. Gasps. The Harkonites began scenting distress. The Sat Hall whispered cold equations. Is this a trick? Khazur barked. I promise you, Laureen said softly, it's far worse than that. Khazur's own military advisors whispered behind him. But the general waved them off. One human? One. You insult me again. I would never, Laureen said. He's already en route. Should be arriving at your moon facility in O. He glanced at his wrist. Any moment now. Khazur's glare didn't break, but his breath changed. Laureen offered a final nod. We've enjoyed our peace. But you wanted a gesture. So here's ours. One man. One mission. Consider it an invitation to recalibrate your understanding. The screen blinked off. Khazur's throne room on Tridaxa Prime's moon fortress, roughly 200,000 kilometers away, shuddered as the early warning sensors blared. The moon's surface cameras caught the re-entry streak of a tiny object. Not a fleet. Not a missile. A pod. A one-man drop pod, standard Terran design. It cut through atmosphere, dragging flame behind it, before slamming into a rocky ridge 10 clicks from the fortress's main gate. Khazur's intelligence officers scrambled, already tracing signals, heat maps, armament profiles. No escort, said the tech priest. Minimal radiation. Just a man-sized craft. No detectable payload. Is he armed? Khazur asked, voice tight. Looks like a projectile rifle. Old model. The general's lip curled. Send in the watchers. Broadcast the encounter. I want the galaxy to see what human bravado amounts to. On the moon's surface, the pod hissed open with a soft venting of pressurized steam. A figure stepped out, silhouetted against the dark. He moved slowly, with the unhurried grace of someone who'd been here before, too many times in too many wars. A long dark coat fell from his shoulders like a shadow that obeyed only him. Across his back was a wooden stock rifle polished to an almost loving sheen. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder and breathed in the thin air like it was nostalgia. Derek Cole had arrived. Inside the command center, Khazur narrowed his eyes at the image of the man walking alone through the dust. The cameras followed him. No armor, no support, just boots, a thermos clipped to his belt, and the long, antique rifle cradled like a promise. Give him a show, Khazur growled. Send in the first squad. I want him on his knees by sundown. 10 elite troopers deployed, each adorned with kinetic shielding, plasma-linked rifles, and years of combat experience across fractured moons and burning starships. Derek saw them from a distance and raised a hand in polite greeting. One of the aliens sneered and stepped forward. You are human, the lead trooper asked. Yes, Derek said. And no, I'm not lost. This is the part where you threaten me, right? The alien raised his weapon. You surrender now, and we may let you. Derek raised a finger. Sorry. One moment. He reached into his coat, unscrewed the cap on the thermos, and poured coffee into a tin cup. Steam rose. You know what's funny? He asked, not looking up. You've been told so much about us. Stories, legends, warnings. But you never really listened, did you? The lead trooper stepped closer, dropped the cup and the weapon. Derek smiled, then moved. There was no warning, no flare of power or flash of tech. Just a blur, old boots shifting, the rifle rising like it remembered. One shot. The leader fell, his shielding offline before the others understood the shot had already happened. The other 9 scattered. Derek moved like water through steel. He ducked behind a ridge, vanished in terrain they considered barren, used wind and echoes and dirt like extensions of his body. Shots rang out. Muffled screams followed. By the time the drones found the scene again, all 10 soldiers were down. None killed. All tagged, tranquilized, marked with a simple painted symbol on their chest, 3 concentric rings and a dot in the center. Khazur's claw twitched as he watched the playback. Slow-motion footage showed Derek walking between the stunned bodies, sipping coffee. He stopped beside one. Tell your general, Derek said, voice caught by a dropped comm bead, that I'm coming for tea. If he likes sugar, I'll bring 2 cubes. He turned to the drone, smiled, then shot it. Back on the Concorde station, the delegates stared at the silent feed. Some trembled. Others looked at one another, trying to decide what they'd just seen. Khazur sat back slowly in his throne, tail coiling tighter. This wasn't a soldier. This was a message. And it had arrived. The moon was silent, but for the whisper of wind skimming over rock, interrupted now and then by the mechanical growl of a recon drone or the distant hum of power conduits buried beneath the crust. Derek Cole walked with deliberate ease, boots crunching on ancient mineral dust as he adjusted the leather strap of the rifle across his shoulder. It was the sort of walk that spoke not of arrogance, but certainty. A man moving through a world already measured and weighed, and finding it familiar. The moonscape was harsh, cratered, framed by jagged outcrops that shimmered faintly under the distant red sun. Cameras tracked him from multiple angles, broadcasting every step to hundreds of military outposts and countless curious viewers across the galaxy. On Tridaxa Prime, children cheered or scoffed in equal measure. News commentators debated his choice of attire. In the Concord Council chamber, some still believed he'd be dead by nightfall. Others were less sure now. Inside the fortress, General Khazur stood before a massive tactical display that showed Derek's progress in glowing pulses of red. "He walks as though he owns the ground," the general muttered, eyes narrowing. "Like we're the guests." His lead strategist, Commander Triel, adjusted the zoom. "He's making for the southern corridor entrance. Should intersect with 2nd Squad in approximately 4 minutes. This time, we deploy hard countermeasures. No mercy." Khazur didn't respond immediately. He was watching the screen, studying the man's posture, his lack of urgency. "Send the squad," he said finally. "But tell them to observe. If he wants to perform for the cameras, let's give him a stage." On the rocky path ahead, Derek paused beside a large stone and crouched. He unscrewed the thermos from his belt and poured coffee into the same small tin cup. The liquid steamed faintly in the chill air. He sipped, sighed in appreciation, then looked up and spoke softly. "They're coming. 5, maybe 6. Probably 2 heavies. Maybe 1 sniper." He tilted his head. "I'd guess a flank or 2. But they'll come polite first. They always do." Behind a distant boulder, listening through a long-range parabolic mic, Sergeant Culp froze. He gestured sharply to the rest of his squad, who went still. "How?" whispered Private Entar, eyes wide behind his visor. "Doesn't matter," Culp muttered. "Stick to protocol. Fan out. Keep visuals." The squad moved into formation, gliding through cover with practice speed. Their armor was top-of-the-line Zarkith composite plating, integrated shielding calibrated to counter kinetic and energy-based weapons. Derek, by contrast, wore what looked like a reinforced coat and carried a rifle that hadn't seen an upgrade in centuries. Still sipping, Derek stood slowly. He didn't raise his weapon, didn't duck or flinch, just turned toward the nearest ridge and called out, "I assume this is the part where you tell me I'm outnumbered." Sergeant Culp hesitated, then stepped forward from behind a tall obsidian spike. "Drop your weapon. Hands on your head. You will be escorted to the fortress. You'll be treated fairly, respectfully, given a warm cell and a fair trial," Derek finished, smiling faintly. Yes, I've heard it all before." "I said drop the weapon." Derek looked down at the rifle, then back up. "Why? She hasn't done anything rude yet." "Last warning." Derek turned slightly, angling his body into partial cover. "You should be careful with warnings, Sergeant. They have this nasty habit of becoming regrets." The squad moved. In perfect synchronization, flanking units emerged on both sides. Sniper took position behind an outcrop. The heavy unit locked targeting. Derek moved faster than anyone expected. His left foot pivoted, kicking up a spray of dust. His right hand drew the rifle in a single smooth motion, shouldering it even as his body dropped. The shot rang out before the sniper could align crosshairs. The sniper dropped, visor cracked clean through. Chaos. Energy bolts lit the ridge as the squad returned fire, but Derek was already gone, vanished behind terrain he'd mapped in memory during the descent. He didn't run, he flowed. Each movement calculated, each choice of angle giving him cover, and sight lines no AI could predict. He weaved through fire, laid low 2 flanking units with ricochet shots, then disappeared again. Private Entar swore in 3 dialects and fired wildly into a cave mouth. His shots hit only stone. Then his gun locked. Static interference, something jamming the circuits. Derek stepped behind him like a shadow reborn. "New recruits," he murmured, gently tapping the private's helmet with his barrel. So jittery. The third shot was silent. Tranquilizer. Entar crumpled. Sergeant Kulf pivoted and fired point-blank, his bolt glancing off Derek's shoulder as the latter twisted just in time. The armor crackled. Derek spun and slammed his rifle, but into the sergeant's chest, then ducked the follow-up swing and swept his legs. Kulf landed hard, teeth rattling in his skull. Derek knelt beside him. "Tell me something, Sergeant. When you look at me, what is it you see?" Kulf spat blood. "A madman." "No," Derek said gently. "I'm the invoice. Your general ordered something, and now I've come to collect." He jabbed a tranquilizer into the sergeant's neck and walked away. Inside the fortress, alarm screamed as Khazur watched the icons representing his squad flicker and vanish, one by one. No deaths. No explosions. Just silence. Commander Triel looked pale. "He's disabling them. Clean, quiet. No patterns. No identifiers." "Why isn't he killing them?" Khazur demanded. "Maybe he's sending a message." Khazur turned, furious. "Message? That we're incompetent." "No," Triel whispered. "That we're prey." Derek approached the southern gate, where 2 sentries manned a defensive post. The gate was 20 meters tall, sealed with quantum locks, reinforced plating, and twin auto turrets. He knocked. One sentry looked at the other. Then the intercom crackled. "State your purpose." Derek said brightly. "With the general. I heard he likes jasmine. Personally, I prefer Earl Grey, but I'm a visitor, not a tyrant." The sentries hesitated. Derek tilted his head. "Look, I could go through the gate, but I'd rather not break anything unnecessarily. It's a beautiful door." "Stand down," one sentry replied. "This is a restricted zone." "Yes," Derek nodded, "but I'm very persistent." One turret activated, locking on his center mass. He sighed. So much for polite entry. The next sequence happened too quickly for the sentries to react. Derek flipped backward, landing behind a boulder. A flashbang burst from beneath his coat and detonated midair. The sentries reeled. Derek sprinted for the wall. A magnetic line shot from a device at his belt and hooked into a support ridge. He vaulted up, swung once, and launched over the edge. By the time reinforcements reached the wall, he was already gone. Security teams poured into the corridors, sweeping with scanners. Derek avoided them all. He didn't hide. He simply moved where they weren't. He mapped the fortress like it was a second skin. Studied it from the moment Earth intercepted its blueprints a decade ago. He passed labs, training chambers, archives. Paused to glance at a schematic etched into a wall, then kept moving. He wasn't there for sabotage. Not yet. He was there for a conversation. Khazur stood alone now in the upper tower, the war room emptied of advisors. The outer doors hissed open. Derek stepped in, brushing moon dust from his coat. "Tea," he said, holding up a small pouch. "Brought jasmine anyway. Figured you'd be too proud to ask." Khazur stared, lips peeled back over fangs. "You breached my fortress. My gates. My security grid." "Well," Derek shrugged. "Technically, I knocked first." Khazur surged forward, claws glinting. Derek didn't flinch. He simply looked him in the eye. "I'd think twice about that." "You think I fear you?" "No," Derek said. "But you should." Khazur froze. Derek took a step closer. "Do you know why Earth never joined your war games? Never signed your peace forged in blood? It's not because we're afraid. It's because we remember what war really is, what it costs, what it takes from a person." Khazur said nothing. "We learned something from centuries of setting ourselves on fire," Derek continued. "That real power doesn't scream. It whispers. It smiles. And when it moves, no one sees it coming." Khazur growled low. "What are you?" Derek's eyes didn't flicker. "The thing your empire tried so hard to become, but never understood. From the shadows, small hovering recorders blinked awake. Every word, every image, every tremor in Kazur's stance was being fed live to the Concord network. Derek reached into his coat and placed a single chess piece on the table between them. A black knight. "You wanted a message?" Derek said, turning to leave. "This is it. One man. No ships. No fleet. Just one." Kazur remained silent as the human disappeared through the far corridor, the cameras trailing after him. Far above, in the Concord chamber, the footage ended, and the silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was dawning comprehension. A fresh broadcast lit up across a dozen galactic channels, footage of the Earth-born operative, known now only as the One, walking calmly through the halls of a heavily fortified Zarkith war fortress. News anchors struggled to maintain composure. Commentators speculated wildly. Some claimed it was staged. Others compared him to ancient Earth gods of war, despite the mild-mannered mannerisms and old rifle. On the floor of the Concord chamber, Counselor Threx of the Glintari shifted uncomfortably, one eye stalk twisting in a loop of concern. "We still don't have a name," he asked. "No official designation," replied the Concord AI. However, intercepted Zarkith footage identifies the human as Derek Cole. Ambassador Lorene, still sipping his coffee on Earth's diplomatic live feed, chimed in pleasantly. He prefers not to stand on ceremony. "Or titles." "Titles." Threx repeated. "He's destabilized a planetary war command post by himself." Lorene gave a small smile. "That's not destabilization. That's just him stretching." Inside the fortress, Derek stood in a darkened corridor, lit only by the pale blue emergency lights lining the floor. The air smelled like recycled metal and sweat. He'd passed through a dozen squads without lethal force, carefully, precisely, leaving behind stunned or unconscious enemies and no trail. His weapon remained slung across his back. He hadn't needed it much. He approached a wide bulkhead door sealed with Zarkith rune locks, paused, and placed a small, palm-sized disc onto the panel. The lock blinked red, then green. The door opened with a soft hiss. He stepped into the intelligence core. Rows of data columns stretched to the ceiling, humming with the accumulated knowledge of the Zarkith war engine. Maps, troop deployments, psychological profiles of enemy species. Derek wandered between them like a man browsing dusty bookshelves in a Sunday library. A technician behind a glass screen looked up, 6 eyes widening at the sight of him. "You're not supposed to be," the alien stammered. Derek held up a hand. "I won't shoot you if you make me a copy of that sector map behind you." The one tagged Operation Gilded Maw. The technician's limbs trembled. "That's classified." "I'm sure it is." Derek smiled. "That's why I'm asking nicely." The tech hesitated, hand hovering over the silent alarm. "I'd really rather you didn't," Derek said gently. "Alarms make me twitchy, and I don't like being twitchy." The tech's hand moved to the console instead, and within seconds, the file was loaded into a portable shard and passed under the divider. "See," Derek said, tucking the shard into his coat. "Good manners make for excellent cooperation." The broadcast resumed 5 minutes later with him walking calmly out of the intelligence core. News channels exploded again. Commentary surged. Panic began to ripple, quietly, under the surface, among military strategists of several advanced species. What had started as mockery had become a study in restraint. Derek found a quiet stairwell and sat on the 3rd step. He pulled a protein bar from his inner pocket, unwrapped it, and began chewing thoughtfully. The old rifle rested beside him, the metal worn where his fingers had gripped it for decades. Footsteps echoed above, light, fast, nervous. He waited. A young alien officer appeared at the top of the stairwell. Small, wiry, and shaking. "Lost." Derek asked. The officer raised a pulse pistol with 2 hands. "Stay back." "Why is everyone always so nervous when I sit down?" Derek muttered. "I swear, I've done more violence sitting in chairs than standing in fields." The officer's grip tightened. "You know this isn't going to end well for you," Derek said, not unkindly. "I don't say that as a threat. It's just math." "You're one man," the officer snapped. "No," Derek said, standing slowly. I'm one human. That's not the same. He stepped forward unarmed. The officer's finger twitched, then steadied. What are you? The officer asked, voice cracking. Derek looked up at the flickering light. A leftover. A lesson. Maybe a mirror. Depends on who's watching. The officer didn't shoot. Derek stepped past and continued downward. Elsewhere in the fortress, Khazur was pacing. Maps glowed around him, each one an artifact of control. He'd built empires off information. He'd subjugated systems with careful intimidation, economic pressure, surgical force. But this was something else entirely. He doesn't destroy, Khazur muttered. He destabilizes. He plays the long game, said Commander Triel, pale and stiff. Every move he's made non-lethal, precise, with psychological weight. Khazur spun to face him. He's not fighting. He's telling a story. Triel nodded. One we're all now part of. The general's jaw clenched. He's here to break me. No, Triel said softly. He's here to remind you that we've already been broken. The fortress's lower wing was quiet now. Derek entered a small chapel space. Zarkith shrines to ancient war gods, all jagged stone and black glass. He looked around and touched a sculpture lightly, with one hand. They all prayed for victory, he said to no one, but never considered what they'd become if they won. A drone zipped into the room, armed with a rapid detonation charge. It hovered just over his shoulder. He sighed, turned, and raised an eyebrow. You're interrupting. The drone scanned him. He blinked once. The drone's targeting system suddenly blinked red, then blue, then shut off. Derek tapped his belt. One small signal jammer, barely the size of a coin, hidden in the lining. Expensive toy, he muttered, catching the drone mid-fall. He left it on the shrine, almost reverently. The galaxy watched him walk alone through the chaos he never caused directly, but orchestrated with a tactician's grace. He never shouted, never boasted. He asked for tea, offered smiles, warned gently. And each time he spoke, 100 military minds felt a new fear bloom in their chests. Derek's next stop was a secure observation deck overlooking the main reactor core. One lone guard stood at the window, arms crossed, eyes shut tight. You going to shoot me? The guard asked without turning. I don't think so, Derek replied. Why are you doing this? Because someone told your general we were afraid of war. The guard opened one eye. Aren't you? No, Derek said. We're afraid of what we become when we stop avoiding it. Silence stretched between them. Then Derek stepped past and pressed his hand to the emergency comm station. The voice channel to Khazur's private office lit green. A pause. Then the general's voice came through. Still alive. Derek smiled. Yes. And disappointed. Your men lack hospitality. I could flood the corridor you're in. You could. I could gas it. You could. Then why don't I? Because I've already looped this feed to the Concord, the Council, and 10 of your allied species. They're watching you decide. Silence again. You knew we'd be recording, Khazur said slowly. I counted on it. You wanted a stage. No, Derek replied. You did. I just borrowed it. The line went dead. Khazur stood alone in his war chamber, fists clenched, breath coming heavy. He turned to his display wall, every map, every model, everything crumbling under the weight of one man and a very old rifle. He slammed a fist into the console, shattering the screen. Derek walked quietly down the last corridor toward the central chamber. His pace didn't quicken. His expression didn't change. He passed through automated defenses now turned off. Cameras rotated slowly, following him like eyes no longer sure if they were predator or prey. He paused at a door marked with the crest of Khazur's house. A long breath. He reached up and knocked, 3 soft taps. From behind the door, a voice said, "Come in." Derek opened it. The chamber was dimly lit. No guards. No weapons raised. Just the general, alone, standing behind a table set with a pot of steeping jasmine tea. Derek stepped in and looked at the table. Khazur gestured. Derek sat. Neither spoke for a long while. Steam curled upward in soft spirals. The general's hands trembled as he poured. He spilled a little. Derek accepted the cup without comment. You win, Khazur said finally. No, Derek replied. You lose. That's different. The general's throat clicked. What are you going to do? I'm going to leave, Derek said. And you're going to tell your people the truth. And if I don't? Derek reached into his coat and placed a shard on the table. Khazur recognized it immediately, a broadcast spike. If activated, it would send the contents of Derek's journey to every network in the sector. Khazur's eyes flicked upward. Derek sipped his tea. We didn't come to conquer. We came to warn you. One man walked through your empire and didn't need to raise his voice. Imagine what happens if we stop being polite. Khazur looked down. Why didn't you kill us? He asked. Derek stood. Because you're still useful, he said. And because mercy, real, terrifying mercy, is louder than any war cry. He left the room in silence. Far above, in orbit, thousands watched the final image transmitted. Derek Cole walking calmly through the burning outer gates of the fortress as the first light of morning broke across the moon's jagged ridge. A silent man, a polite one, but no one mistook him for anything less than an apex predator. The fortress burned quietly, not with flames, but with humiliation. Its walls still stood, turrets still tracked, and systems still hummed, but none of it mattered. A man had walked through it untouched, dismantling fear and confidence with a rifle he barely used and words that cut deeper than any blade. Every corridor remembered him. Every soldier left behind whispered about the one human. Not loud, never loud, but something in their voices suggested they would never speak as loudly again. Khazur sat alone at the center of his war chamber, surrounded by shattered data screens and fading command signals. His armor had been discarded in pieces, chest plate cracked, shoulder guards crumpled on the floor like the shell of something outgrown. He had not moved for an hour. The fortress was silent now, except for one sound, the soft rhythm of approaching footsteps. Calm, measured. Khazur turned his head toward the door just as it opened, and Derek Cole stepped in for the second time. This time, he didn't knock. He walked like a man returning to a familiar place, quietly, without malice, but with purpose. The rifle rested across his back again, untouched since the gate. His coat was dusty. There was a new scuff along his jaw, and a small smear of blood on his left boot, but otherwise, he looked unchanged. Khazur watched him cross the room with slow steps. Back again. You didn't answer the last question, Derek said, stopping 10 feet away. Khazur's eyes narrowed. Which one? Who you were before you named yourself warlord. A beat. Then another. Khazur turned his gaze downward, claws slowly curling into the table's edge. That was a long time ago. Derek said nothing. Waited. I was an engineer, Khazur said finally. Before the wars, I designed atmospheric stabilizers, tectonic regulators, things that kept moons from splitting open under their own pressure. Derek nodded once, slowly. And then came the outer ring collapse. Our council fractured. The old orders failed. I saw what chaos does, what fear builds when it's left unchecked. Khazur looked up. I took control. You started wars. I prevented collapse. Derek walked to the far side of the room and looked out the wide viewport. From here, the stars looked smaller, distant, like something you could almost swallow if you were arrogant enough. Khazur's voice broke the quiet. You could have killed me 10 times over. I still could. But you didn't. No, Derek said. Because this wasn't about your death. Khazur frowned. Then what? Your surrender. A flash of pride flared in the general's eyes, reflexive, instinctive. He stood, slow but defiant. I don't surrender to threats. You already have, Derek said, turning from the window. You just haven't realized it yet. Khazur's chest heaved. This was supposed to be my moment, my speech. The day the galaxy listened. They did listen, Derek said, voice like cooled iron. But not to you. The general's mouth curled. Do you think this changes anything? The galaxy will forget in weeks, months. No, they won't. Derek stepped forward again. Because they weren't watching a war. They were watching the difference between a conqueror and a consequence. Khazur's nostrils flared. You act like you're better. No, Derek said quietly. Just older. Our species made every mistake you're making now. We burned whole continents to win arguments. We erased cities to prove points. And after all that, when the smoke cleared, we realized we'd survived not because of our strength, but because we stopped. The general lowered his eyes. Derek walked to the center of the room, removed the chess piece from his coat, and placed it back on the table. The Black Knight. You asked what I was, he said. You wanted to understand why Earth didn't flinch, why we didn't rally fleets or scream into the sky. He looked up, and the calm dropped from his face like a mask. What I am, Derek said, is what waits behind the silence, what fills the space when diplomacy ends. You thought our restraint was weakness. It was your shield. Khazur sat again, this time slowly, like the weight had caught up to him. Derek remained standing. You called us afraid of war. We aren't. We just remember what war does when you invite it in and pour it a drink. The general's claws tapped the table once, twice. A habit, not fear. Thoughtfulness. He stared at the night piece. Why a knight, he asked. It doesn't move like the others, Derek said. You think you know where it's going, but it strikes from odd angles. Unexpected, disruptive. Like you. Like us. Outside, the fortress lit up with soft blue beacon lights. Not alerts. Not alarms. The kind of light used when a territory voluntarily signals a ceasefire. Khazur noticed the glow. My men called it in, Derek said. 3 minutes ago. They stood down. They're tired. Khazur breathed in, nostrils flaring, as if struggling to inhale the truth. Derek crossed to the corner of the room and retrieved the small satchel he'd planted earlier. From it, he pulled out 2 glass vials and a folded message shard. These are yours, he said, setting them on the table. Your engineers will recognize the molecules. It's a cure for the mining plague affecting your southern colonies. Khazur's eyes widened. How do you? We knew. We've known for a while. We intercepted your requests for aid. Concord ignored them. You're giving this to me? No, Derek said. We're giving it to the people who'll suffer if you don't. Khazur's claws lifted one of the vials slowly. You could have used this as leverage. I still could. But you won't. I'm tired, Khazur. Earth is tired. We didn't come here to dominate. We came to see if there was still something worth saving. The general's eyes flicked upward again. Something had changed in them. Not defeat. Not quite shame. Something quieter. Older. Like a memory of who he used to be. Flickering behind the armor of who he had become. You're not a soldier, Khazur said softly. No, Derek replied. I'm the question your actions have to answer. A long silence stretched between them. Then Khazur stood again, straightened, and nodded once. What happens now? Now. Derek took the night piece again and tucked it into his coat. Now the galaxy watches you decide who you want to be. He walked toward the door. Khazur hesitated. If I leave this room and return to my people, do I still rule? That depends on what you say next. Derek turned to him once more, eyes cold and clear. Make it count. And then he was gone. No dramatic exit. No final warning. Just a man walking through a door that had once been guarded by fear. Khazur remained at the table for a long time. At some point, he poured a cup of the now cold tea. He drank it in silence. 3 hours later, a message was transmitted across all known sectors from Tridaxa Prime. Not from Earth. Not from the Concord. From Khazur himself. He stood on the fortress steps with no armor, no crown, no weapons. He addressed the galaxy not as a warlord, but as a man reclaiming his voice. We misjudged, he said. Not just Earth, but ourselves. We mistook volume for strength, teeth for wisdom. I have seen the cost of forgetting humility. He held up the Black Knight. This was not a war. It was a conversation. One we needed to have. And from this moment on, the Zarkut Dominion will choose a different path. One led by thought, by truth, and by listening to those who have already walked where we now stand. The message ended. The galaxy went still. Across thousands of systems, fleets paused. Troops stood down. Leaders reconsidered meetings they'd scheduled for next week. On Earth, Ambassador Loreen smiled over his coffee and turned to the council. I believe that concludes our demonstration. High above orbit, Derricole's dropship coasted out of Tridax's gravity well. He leaned back in his seat, eyes closed, listening to the silence. Not the absence of noise, but the aftermath of something understood. He reached into his coat and pulled out the night again, turned it between his fingers. Not bad, he murmured. Behind him, the stars shimmered. Galaxies pulsed. And in their reflection, somewhere deep in the heart of a changing universe, the memory of a single human remained. Not a conqueror, not a savior,